Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming, and thanks to CB5 for both convening this event and for inviting Design Trust for Public Space to talk about our project, Made in Midtown. I'm going to talk very briefly for about a minute about who Design Trust for Public Space is, and then jump straight to the project. So you see our mission statement here. We were founded in 1995. Since then, we've completed dozens of projects, resulting in legislation, design competitions, build projects, exhibitions, publications, all of which are designed to improve the public space of New York City for all New Yorkers. How do we work? Every 18 months or so, we put out an open call to community groups, city agencies, other nonprofits. They apply to work with us on a planning or design project relating to public space somewhere in the 5 boroughs that they don't have the resources or expertise to take on themselves. An independent jury helps us select projects that we'll work on. We then partner those groups with private sector professionals to carry out the work. Our work is inclusive. We engage all stakeholders, and we produce products that are accessible to the broadest public. And all of our projects are designed to be implemented. So as you can imagine, public space is a broad topic, which means we cover a broad range of projects. I'm just going to run through 3 very quickly. Our feasibility study, Reclaiming the High Line, helped convince the Bloomberg administration to lift the demolition order. Some of you may be familiar with the project that resulted. We worked closely with the Taxi and Limousine Commission to make both individual taxi vehicles and the entire taxi system more energy efficient and more accessible to all New Yorkers, and to design a new iconic taxi for the 21st century. That project led directly to the city's Taxi of Tomorrow, in which they issued an RFP to car manufacturers all over the world to build the next generation of taxis for the city. And then finally, for about 4 years, we worked with the Parks Department to create a publication called High Performance Landscape Guidelines that will make every aspect of Parks' operations, from design to construction to maintenance, more sustainable. They are working with their staff in every division to implement the guidelines that we worked on, and they're producing new parks like this playground in the Bronx that follow the guidelines outlined in our book. In 2009, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, a trade organization that represents fashion designers, approached us to do a study of the Garment District. At the time, city officials were working with stakeholders in the area on a plan to rezone the district to lift the zoning that protects manufacturing, and to relocate fashion-related businesses into a single building or a series of buildings. CFDA asked us to do a study of the Garment District, how it works, and whether or not it provided value to the fashion industry and to the city. What we told them was we would take on this project, but we would do it independently as an open-ended inquiry, and that if we found that the Garment District was not productive, was not providing value to the industry or to the city, we would publish those findings, and they said, okay. So we assembled a multidisciplinary team, urban planners, architects, web designer, graphic designer, journalist, and filmmaker. We interviewed over 70 stakeholders. This is Ron Frasch, the head of Saks, who looks very unhappy about his impending interview, but cheered up later. We also talked to many fashion designers, including some big name ones like Yoli Tang, Nanette Lepore, Diane von Furstenberg, but also garment workers, factory owners, students, Simon Collins, the Dean of Fashion here at Parsons, property owners, city officials, all to get a broad picture of what's happening in the district today. We also looked at over 20 years of federal, state, and city data, including many charts and tables like the one you see here, and tried to both make sense of them, but also make them accessible to anyone who wanted to understand what was going on. And we started by looking at the history of the neighborhood, how it evolved over time, and what some of the forces are that are acting on the neighborhood today. So just to make sure that everyone's oriented, the Garment District is roughly 34th to 40th Street, Broadway to 9th. In 1987, the city established the Special Garment Center Zoning District, which is the pink anvil shape you see here. It was intended to preserve manufacturing and to discourage conversion to other uses. So that legislation was very successful if you look at the decline of manufacturing in other parts of the city. I think you could also safely say it made everyone a little bit unhappy. So property owners complain that it unfairly restricts what they can do with their buildings. Fashion industry representatives complain that the legislation is not enforced enough. That special district was one of many that the city has created over the last 3 or 4 decades. In Midtown, many of those zoning districts helped jumpstart conversions to high-end, high-rise residential, office, and entertainment districts, remaking vast swaths of Midtown. So that's resulted in the Garment District being kind of the hole in the donut. While uses are restricted inside the Garment District, there's been this explosion of new development outside. This map shows residential, office, and hotel development since 2005. This is a picture of 2 new hotels on 39th Street where our office is located. And what I want everyone to look at here is not a question about scale or design, but just to understand this. When we look at new development like this, everyone can agree that it brings value to the city. New hotels service the tourism industry, which is a huge economic engine for the city. New development attracts new residents, it generates tax revenue. But what we found was that no one was articulating the value of the manufacturing and supply core in the Garment District. And as a result, there was no real vision for what the future of the district should be. Instead, there was an overemphasis on the district's history. So we all know that at one point, the Garment District was responsible for some 95% of all clothes sold in stores in the US. That kind of mass production doesn't exist today in the Garment District. But what we tried to do with the project was look at what are the district's strengths and how does it work right now, not in the past.